Different people will look at the fact the money came in, but look, already something has come up. It never goes my way, and there it already goes. I told you, easy come, easy go, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's another mindset that might be, you know what, I'm safe. I'm safe at all times because anytime I needed money, I've
Okay.
managed to get it.
Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast. I'm Jo Clark and I'm so glad you're here. And this is a podcast for women who are ready to break free from outdated stereotypes, rediscover themselves, and embrace the endless opportunities that midlife brings. Each week, I'll share expert advice, actionable strategies, and inspiring conversations with incredible women who are redefining what it means to thrive in midlife and beyond. From health and wellness to reigniting your purpose and passions, this is your go-to podcast for feeling empowered, supported, and seen. Now, midlife isn't the end. It's your time to shine, rewrite your story, and create a life that you truly love. So let's get started. Welcome to this week's episode of Redefining Midlife. Now, whether you're a long-time listener or you're tuning in for the very first time, I'm just so glad you're here. Now, today's conversation is both incredibly helpful and absolutely fascinating. In fact, you may find it life-changing. I'm talking to award-winning finance expert and best-selling author Natasha Janssens on the topic of money in midlife and the important role it plays for women and, in particular, the unique personal relationship we all have with money. And Natasha has a passion for supporting women to transform their relationships with money because, as you'll discover, numbers play only a small part of the story. Now, this conversation really made me think deeply about my own personal relationship with money over the course of my life, and it also helped me to understand so much more about where my various money stories came from, the role they've played in my life, and the role that they can play in my future. This is truly a conversation that all midlife women should hear, and I really encourage you to listen carefully, have your notebook handy, because Natasha shares some incredible insights, lots and lots of tips, and knowledge on how our relationship with money can shape our future. And because this is such helpful, life-changing information, be sure to share this episode with another midlife woman who needs to hear it. Enjoy. Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast, Natasha. It is lovely to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for today's conversation.
It's going to be a big, juicy one because today we're going to be talking about the psychology of money, the power it has in our lives. And I know for many of our listeners, it's going to be quite a new topic and eye-opening for many of them. And it might have been something that they've really explored in depth. But before we dive into this, I'd love for us all to get to know you a little better and learn how you've become not only a best-selling author on the topic, but also one of Australia's leading finance experts, particularly in this new area of money psychology. So, Natasha, can you tell us all about your younger years? Where did you grow up and what was life like for young Natasha?
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, do you know what? It really has been a journey. The work that I do now is not something that was ever, on my career path or anything that I thought that I would be doing when I was a little girl. So I have an Eastern European background. I'm Serbian. I came from what was back then known as Yugoslavia. And due to my father's work, I traveled quite a bit as a kid. So I was actually born in Uganda. I went to primary school in Sri Lanka, and between that, we sort of had postings sort of back to Yugoslavia. And so, really, until I was 18, all I knew of was war,
Mm.
poverty, instability. These were all really high stress situations. So, probably comes as no surprise if I say now that even though I'm a finance, quote unquote expert, I still grapple with financial anxiety because it was such a huge thing. I remember I would have been, oh gosh, 10 or 11. And because in Yugoslavia we had a period of hyperinflation, so where money was losing value so rapidly, my dad being a public servant, and back then they'd be paid once a month. So he would work, can you imagine this? He would work for a month. He'd get paid, let's say, on the Monday morning. And by lunchtime Monday, that entire month's paycheck has lost all of its value.
Oh my
Like you could
gosh.
literally buy like a packet of a kilo of flour or sugar with it. Like that's how quickly it lost value. So yeah, there were, fairly stressful times sort of growing up. So it's sort of money then was always front of mind for me. Like I loved playing Monopoly and I was always the banker with Monopoly. I loved playing supermarkets and we'd sort of use the leaves off the trees as different sort of denominations, different size leaves with different amounts, and we'd sort of play checkouts and all of that.
Yeah.
So in some ways, looking back on it now, I'm not surprised that I ended up in finance. But yeah, I always thought, I think there was a period I thought software development would be my thing, and it was something that I studied initially. So yeah, it was very different to where I am now.
And what an amazing grounding. Like that's an experience that few people would ever have, like, and to experience it in a number of different countries. A number of people might come to Australia from a war-torn background or a situation that was quite difficult. However, you experience that in a number of different countries. Does that change how you like to use your skills now in imparting this knowledge to people? That's, we really need, especially for women, we really need to understand money more and just the importance of it, as well as not to over exaggerate sometimes the importance of having, money and making it such a stressful part of our lives.
Mm. Yeah, it absolutely has because, as I said, I came to Australia. I actually fled here on my own shortly after my 18th birthday.
Wow.
So the town back home was bombed, and one thing led to another, and I found myself locked out of Yugoslavia, and I was stuck in Hungary for about 6 weeks. And because we had had a posting to Canberra, that was like the last place that I knew. And so I was locked out and I went, well, I don't speak Hungarian, I don't know anyone. And so I made my way, gradually back to Canberra. And it really has shaped what I do now because I lived in all these different countries, as you said, and the consistency of what I found was, war and poverty. So when I came to Canberra, like Australia to me was something like in a dream, like the place that I honestly saw in movies that I never thought really existed. And so when I came here and I fell into accountancy just because of, again, immigration, I just sort of went, whatever was going to get me residency, I was like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I did study software development at first, and then that moved on to accounting and commerce and business and all these things along the way. But it did start to, in a sense, frustrate me a little bit because I found, I've come from places where poverty is so widespread, and there's Aussies, leading these, you could argue we're such a wealthy country, we have comfortable lifestyles, and people just weren't making the most of what they had. They were very detached from their finances. Financial stress is still a huge thing being, and this was before COVID, before us talking about recession and times being tough. Financial stress is the leading cause of stress in Australia.
Mm.
And I just thought, gosh, we are so fortunate here. This isn't right. I want to do something about it, and I want to make it better. Because again, working as an accountant, I would see people at the end of the transaction, and usually like a year afterwards. And if I tried to question them about their investments or if they had investment properties and mortgage structures and all of that, obviously as accountants, we're trying to get to the bottom of it to sort of know what can be claimed and how to do it. And the number of people, men and women alike, who just didn't understand, oh, it's just something the mortgage broker did. And I was like, yeah, but hang on, like, what's this about and what's that for? And they just really didn't, were either overwhelmed or were just that detached from it. They just didn't know what was going on with their money. And I thought, all right, I'm going to do something. I'm going to set up a business where I actually, get these people more engaged, more proactive, because there's then so much more freedom that you can have if are more connected to your money and you're using it in the way that's meaningful to you, right? And so that was what I started. And I always say, I work now, my business is Women with Sense, and I work predominantly with women, but I often say I'm sort of the accidental feminist because it wasn't my intention to be specializing in this space. I started wanting to work with everyone. And what happened was, Murphy's Law. I had been trying to have a baby for a little while
Mm.
and had been putting off the idea of a business. And I thought, look, who knows when this is going to happen? Like, let's just stop putting life on hold and just go and do it. And of course, less than 3 months into my brand new business, it's like, hey, you're finally pregnant. Good timing. Okay, okay. But I'm such a believer in things happening for a reason because that was then really what transform my business into what it is now, because I then started connecting with mums and with mothers groups. And, I then realized how many of them were wanting to engage more around finances. But back then, we're talking about 10 years ago now, Facebook groups were just becoming a thing where people were reaching out and connecting and asking questions. But when we look at finance being so heavily male dominated, when you have these women focused groups, there's then no one there who works in the finance space who can then myth bust or say, well, actually, that's misinformation or this is the right thing or whatnot. And so that was when I said to them, okay, well, how about we then create, instead of a mums group, we create a separate group where we get together and we talk about money, be it online. We then moved it into a cafe and started catching up with mums and bubs. And it just grew from there. I then had women saying, well, look, I'm not a mum. How can I participate in this? Hey, I'm not in Canberra. How can I participate in this?
Yeah.
And then sort of went and took it online. But really, had I not fallen pregnant when I did, my business vision and focus was very, very different. But yeah, I really realized just how, in many ways, how ignorant I was to the challenges that many women face, just because I had a very different upbringing and I was always used to working in male-dominated environments. So I always had male mentors, and so when women came to me and said, I have all this self-doubt, or I feel really intimidated by my accountant, I'm afraid to ask these questions because they might judge me. Like, that was just eye-opening to me, because I had no idea that this is sort of what was going on. Because again, surrounded in male environments, male mentors, like I was taught to sort of think the way that they think, right? So there
Yeah.
was never this moment of self-doubt. It's like, and people always used to say to me, you're very direct, which is very interesting when we talk about women. I was like,
Isn't it?
I just spoke the way my boss spoke. Like, we need something and we go and ask for it. And,
Yeah.
and that was when I started noticing, oh, there's a different expectation to how I communicate as a woman versus,
And did
what
that
seems to be
change
the
and evolve?
norm.
Did you notice that you started to change the way that you
I
give the
did a
information
bit.
and advice?
Yeah, I did a bit. I sort
Oh,
of switched
interesting.
my communication style because I was like, oh, okay. Am I offending you? Like, sorry, I didn't. Let's start off with hope you had a no, lovely weekend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No,
Let's get a bit of the small talk in.
yeah,
That's great.
it
Yeah.
was really, really interesting. Um, but yeah, it just then it made me realize, and I, through the experience of becoming a mum, noticed as well that despite me having that male influence, we still, my husband and I, fell into these subconscious gendered norms when
Hmm.
it came to parenting, right? And who was doing what. And it was at that point that I went, look, we really, as women, we have to be our own advocates. We have to be assertive. We have to hold that boundary, because no one else will do it for us. They don't, the rest of society doesn't per se benefit if my husband needs to do the laundry now. Like, he was happy he had his free time, right?
Yeah.
But it never occurred to him, and he just assumed that this was something, I don't think he really thought twice about it. And I was there, and to this day, I had to work on feeling guilty if he does the laundry, if he does anything around school pickup or school lunches or all of that. Like, I still feel, despite everything, that I'm somehow, not doing my job, and that I'm failing my husband and my kids and all of that. So it's been an ongoing journey of realizing just how much we have to prioritize ourselves and prioritize our well-being and our careers and our financial independence,
Yeah.
because the system has changed, and we can't afford to sacrifice our financial independence for the sake of society,
Hmm.
because the system isn't set up to look after us
Mm.
as a thank you for that. And this is sort of why we see the trends around women over 55, leading numbers in homelessness and all of that, because life throws a curveball,
Yeah.
right? And then we sort of go, okay, well, I sacrificed my career, so I don't have, any assets of my own. And if the relationship hadn't developed and accumulated any assets that were there to be divided, then there's nothing to fall back on. And then you add in ageism,
Hmm.
where it's then that much harder to re-enter the workforce.
Yeah.
And you're now in that space between going, well, and I still can't access the pension or my super. So what do we now do? So I say to young women as well, always, I say, look, even if all you ever wanted was to be a mum, you have to maintain that connection to your ability to generate your own income. And that can even be through volunteer work and doing other things around, but you still have that network so that if you need to, you can then go back and rely on that skill set and you can earn your own income. But otherwise, we are now in a very vulnerable position. And and I say in my book, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place,
Yes.
where there's things that we're expected to do as women and as mothers and as caretakers. But by the same token, we can't afford to just do that either.
Oh, there are so many layers in everything that you've spoken about then. And my head was nodding away at different points because I can really understand some of the things that you were talking about. And I know that, this whole topic of money, it can bring up so many different emotions in every person. Everyone's got a unique relationship with money based on their past experiences, based on, maybe what their future could look like. And that's why these big emotions can come up and stress can come up with when we're talking about money. And I know that when we had our pre-chat conversation a number of weeks ago, but I could not believe the different areas, just in what you were saying before, so many different areas and topics that you brought up, just on when we talk the overarching theme of money and what that means. So if we can start talking about now a conversation with money and our relationship with money. So you're very experienced as a financial advisor, but the work you do today is quite different. So let's talk about what those differences are, just so people can almost compartmentalize what are the two different things, kind of things that you're doing now. Or, sorry,
Yes,
what you did in the past and what you're doing now.
that's right. So I often talk about that in order for us to be quote unquote good with money and in flow with money, and whichever way you want to think about it, there's two components to the equation, which is our money IQ, which is that financial literacy, which is knowing how stuff works and the things to be done in order to get to where you want to go. And that's the area where financial planners really focus on. It's that practical stuff of, okay, if you want to get from A to B, this is how we get you there. But the bigger part that I uncovered is that, and look, and this is nothing new, behavioral finance has been talking about this for a long, long time. But we as society associate money with numbers and numbers with logic. So that's where we put all of our effort. We go, if I don't want to be financially stressed, if I want to have more wealth, if I want whatever, I need to focus on the practical things of what I need to do. But in actual fact, the other part of the equation that we need to pay more attention to, and this is sort of, if you're thinking of it in terms of that iceberg, the money IQ, the practical stuff is the bit above the surface that you can see. It's this stuff underneath where you really want to focus your attention on. And that's what we call your money EQ, so the emotional intelligence around money. Really understanding how your emotions drive your financial decisions. And so that's the area where I very much specialize in now. I'm somewhere between, you can call me a money coach or even a money therapist, right? And it's a very new and evolving field. But that was sort of where I ended up going to, because I found I was giving people financial advice. We'd put together this plan, and this is not an uncommon problem. Most financial planners encounter this.
Mhm.
And people just don't do anything with it. They pour so much time and money into it, and then they just don't act and they just don't follow through. And I used to think education was the thing. If we knew this stuff more, if we understood, again, in the money IQ. So I ran workshops and webinars and I wrote a book. And I'm like, still, this needle, like the dial just isn't shifting. So, it really is important that we spend some time understanding that, well, how we go about what are the habits that have formed for you around money, and what are the emotions that are driving your financial decisions. Those are the two parts. And science, again, neuroscience backs this up, where they say if we have a look at the brain and how it's structured and what bits fire off and when, we know that the instinctual parts of the brain, the ones that are focused on habit and emotion and fear, those are the parts that react. Those are the parts that make the decision, rather than the neocortex, the logical and thinking part. That acts, but it acts slower. So you have that aspect of not just getting in touch with what you're feeling, but wanting to learn to slow down the process of decision making. So that logical thinking part of the brain actually has a chance to catch up and engage. But yeah, it's a really fascinating
Mm.
area of work, and it's really rewarding, because once you tap into that, you'll start to see that change can happen quickly. And I'm talking within months. You just have to have that awareness.
Okay, so how do we get that better understanding of our relationship with money? So, how do we uncover what our emotions are? What are our habits? Is there something or place that we can go? What would you suggest?
Yeah, look, so there's a couple of things that you can do. So one is if you go to my website, womenwithsense.com.au, there's a money type quiz there. So that'll get you to go through quickly and just identify the emotions that you can spot. That will be a really good starting point to give you an idea of what are some of these prevailing habits that are there for you.
Mm.
But what I do with my clients when we first kick off is I get them to write down, we call it their money bio, but really it's just your life story. So sitting down, going back as far as you can go from as young as you were, think back through your life events and not just purely from a financial lens, but just what was life like growing up? What were your earliest and fondest memories? What were special occasions like and how was that, was that a stressful time? Was there always some sort of family argument if there was a big event or a birthday, or was it happy? And just starting to reflect on that and also reflecting on how did your parents show love and affection? I find that to be a
That's
really interesting
interesting. Yeah,
question as well,
yeah.
right? Because what we're uncovering is that, and you can use, quote unquote, love language. For some people, they love that terminology, and for others, it's a bit woo. But the reality is that each of us receive love and affection in a different way. For some people, it's really important to be praised. I notice my son, he really needs to hear, I'm really proud of you. That was such a job well done, right? For others, it's that physical contact and hugs and whatnot. But what we find, particularly with older generations, is that a lot of us didn't grow up in particularly affectionate homes. And what was used in place of that was money. So that was either providing for you and showing love by giving you a safe space and all those sorts of things, or it might have been through the purchase of gifts or special occasions and holidays. And so that in itself can start to create that dynamic around, okay, well, if I'm not having a great day, or if I need to feel loved, I need a purchase. There needs to be some sort of tangible thing that I'm
Mm.
receiving. So getting curious about that. Money is often used as a form of punishment and reward. If we think in Australia, what do we say to kids about Santa Claus? You know, Santa Claus, if you have been good,
Yeah.
but if you're on the naughty list, the little things like that, it's not about the event, it's about the meaning that we made in our minds, how we interpreted that. That is what affects what our relationship with money is like. And if you think about it, if we're giving off this message that you only deserve to receive good things or money or benefits if you have been good, gosh, that creates those, again, quote unquote, money blocks and things like that, where you go, well, if I have this association that I haven't worked hard enough, or that I'm not deserving enough of a successful business or of this income stream, it is amazing how much of an effect that can have in stopping us from actually putting into action the things that would go and create that wealth. So
Mm.
if you think about investment, that's a passive form of income. Now, if we have been told money doesn't grow on trees, and if you have to work really hard to get money, well, then maybe having a passive income feels like easy money. Maybe that feels uncomfortable. It doesn't feel safe. And then we step away from doing the very thing that your financial planner is telling you to do, that you need
Yes.
to go and invest and diversify and create these forms of income. So dialing it back, so go back, reflect through what was life like at home? What were mum and dad like around money? What sort of expressions and phrases did they used to use? Was it a very, perhaps some families have a very victim mindset of, everything's out of our control, nothing ever goes our way. What is the point? Did they talk about it in that way? Did they talk
Mm.
about it in money, easy come, easy go? All those things. So starting to get curious about it, reflect back on it. Already that process, you're going to start to notice a little more day to day of what goes through your mind. What are the things that I'm saying and I'm doing? And then thinking as well about how do we respond when we feel stressed and anxious? Again, it's something that we were typically not taught as children.
Mm.
And we often weren't even taught to name what it is that we're feeling. We just have this thing and we want to get rid of it. Well, we then watched and observed, and then we cope with stress by escaping, is either that with a glass of wine or with booking a holiday or a little getaway or something,
Yeah.
or by making myself feel better through, buying myself a treat or something. Maybe I compensate for it by being overly generous to others. All these sorts of things, all of that as well, it has a financial component to it,
Yes.
doesn't it? So, yeah, getting to know yourself a little bit, that is such an important stepping stone. And then you can start to shift it. Then you can go, okay, well, right, how often am I feeling stressed and I'm spending money in this particular way? How often am I being impulsive?
Mm.
We can start to develop strategies to sort of slow that down and to replace it. You really have to have a plan ahead of time of next time I feel stressed, next time I feel anxious, next time I don't feel loved. What's my go-to? My typical go-to might have been this.
Mm.
What am I going to use in its place? And then we start to form these new habits. And then you'll see money will start to flow in the areas that you want it to flow because you're directing it there. You're being more intentional now.
God, it's a fascinating thing. And as you were talking, I was going through different stages in my life. What I grew, the times when I was growing up and coming from a working class family, and money doesn't grow on trees, and you've got to be paying for things in cash, and you've got to be very mindful. And then I suppose for many women, particularly those of us who are in our 50s, a lot of our mothers didn't have the opportunity that we grew up with as far as being able to get loans and being able to accrue larger incomes and having superannuation as well. So there are so many things, I suppose, we haven't had a role model for many of us of women in the past. So for this is why this particular conversation is so important, not only for us, but for our daughters as well to hear some and our sons. But if we look through the female lens, which is quite different, and how we approach money, so it really is fascinating. I'm loving all of this, and yeah, I will be doing more of a deep dive with it. So let's talk about then, and you kind of covered it. There's a popularized or a pop culture term of money mindset and what that means. And how do you know if yours is a good money mindset or a bad money mindset? What the hell does it really mean? So is it a myth? Is it something that is much deeper, like you were taking us through just before?
Yeah, you know what? Money mindset is a trigger word for me.
Oh,
Affirmation,
good. Let's get rolling.
abundance, all of these, and it's not because they're not a legitimate thing. It's just because of the way social media has been using and abusing these things, right? So to me, money mindset really is about that psychology around it and understanding what are your triggers. What are the things that trigger you stress-wise? And what are your, go-to habits and coping mechanisms, and how do you make these financial decisions? What are those beliefs? Is it a belief that, money is hard to come by? Easy come, easy go, all those sorts of things. And that becomes really important just because, again, of the way that our brains work. So our brains, they analyze so much data and information that they then try and create shortcuts. They try and filter out information that's unnecessary. And this is why knowing what your belief systems are and whether or not they are really true, like is that matching reality, or it's something I've just gotten in the habit of thinking that things don't go my way.
Mm.
This is sort of where that becomes really important to shift, purely because you will start to look through life through the lens of those beliefs, because your brain goes, okay, well, there's an investment opportunity over there for argument's sake, but we don't believe that, passive income is a thing. So I'm going to filter out that opportunity, right? And I'm going to look for evidence to make me feel safe. I'm going to look for evidence of facts of things that reinforce my beliefs. So I'm going to look at people who've lost money anytime they invested. I'm going to look at, these particular examples. And this is why we tend to surround ourselves as well with people who think the way we think and feel, right? Because there's that sense of safety. This is why we say if you want to change your habits, be it around fitness, be it around wealth, you want to surround yourself with people who are doing that. Because again, you want to fit in, you want that sense of safety, you want to shift your way of thinking, and you will acclimatize to that environment, right? But yeah, so the money mindset thing, right? So it is a legitimate thing, and it is important for us to take notice of, because those habits and beliefs are, at the end of the day, the things that dictate your financial decisions. So you want to really be aware of, am I telling myself a lie, or is this a reflection of reality? To give you an example, let's say you have an unexpected bill that comes in. And then suddenly you also get an unexpected refund check, from the tax office, right? It has come just in time for you to pay that bill. Now, different people will look at that in different ways. Different people will look at the fact that money came in But look, already something has come up. It never goes my way, and there it already goes. I told you, easy come, easy go, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's another mindset that might be, you know what, I'm safe. I'm safe at all times because anytime I needed money, I've
Okay.
managed to get it,
Mm.
right? Same situation, but one is a more, I guess, more assertive, more confident way of thinking around money. The other one is more powerless and more victimized. You know,
Mm.
anytime I get it, I lose it. What is the point? You know, so noticing really, and you can see there, if I have that what is the point mindset, that becomes really easily a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if I don't believe that I have what it takes to achieve my goals, I'm not even going to take the first step.
Yeah.
Well, there's zero chance that I'm going to achieve that goal in that case.
Mm.
So, yeah, and having those conversations with our daughters, as we said, it's really important to have to lead by example. This is why I believe that that gender gap is so slow to close, because it's not enough that we talk about it. It's if we're talking about little kids, it's monkey see, monkey do, right? It is we have to demonstrate, we have to lead the way. So if we are now talking to our daughters, hey, I'm looking at this about my super, I'm doing it in this way. Look, I made these decisions and now, unfortunately, I'm now faced with the challenge of X, Y, and Z, bringing them on board with those conversations. It'll bring you closer together as well, but it's really going to be so much more powerful to teaching the next generation of what to do. And
Mm.
it's so important that we do it because unfortunately, despite everything that's happening, the research is showing that the Gen Z girls are now more disengaged from finances. We're now going backwards from everything that we have worked on. Yeah. So, and I think social media is having such a big part to play in that.
Oh, that's sad to
So,
hear that.
yeah,
I
so
can
it
also
is.
see the trap that a lot of the younger generations would be falling under because when I think back to, my daughter's age now, she's in her mid-20s. I never had online shopping. I never had access to easy credit, pay, not that she does a lot of those things, but it's an easy way for people to, I can just pay for things further down the track. There's sort of that added element as well that is quite new in our society.
It is. And this is the thing. So, in many ways, we are psychologically not built or equipped to handle money and technology in the way
Mhm.
that it is, because that has evolved, in a matter of decades, right? And if you think of us as a species, how many generations and iterations it takes for our bodies to evolve and to catch up, right? So, what it means is that we still have these very primal instincts, particularly around impulsiveness, that technology is currently exploiting.
Yeah.
So they know exactly how to give you that right marketing message. And now there's the technology there so that you now use your phone to pay. You don't even feel the pain of losing
Mm.
that money out of your account, right? So the technology and marketing companies, they know our brains and our spending habits and decision-making processes better than we know ourselves.
Yes.
So this is why it becomes an even greater sort of hurdle from that point of view. And then they're being bombarded with everything that we used to be, but tenfold more around the pressure to look a particular way. So we now have Botox and fake nails, and to the point that my daughter, who's 7, who doesn't have social media, she has had access to YouTube, but she's already picked up on these things and seeing in the
Wow.
supermarkets the long fake stick-on nails and all
Yeah.
of that. And so we're having that conversation again around going, what is my value? What is my worth? It's beyond just these things and really encouraging her to be entrepreneurial, and sort of directing her in other ways away from what the online messaging has been. So yeah, it is a challenge, and I think we need to come at it with a lot more, I guess, compassion and understanding for one another,
Yeah.
because again, we carry so much shame around money.
Hmm.
So if we, out of good intentions, be it to our child or to our spouse or sibling, if we want to help, we have to be really careful around the language that we use,
Yes.
because someone will very quickly feel shame and judgment, and they will then shut down and just not be open to any suggestions. So
Yeah.
open questions and support and curiosity ends up being the biggest way that we can support each other.
It's quite significant, isn't it, how fast things have moved? I remember as a young teacher being paid with a check and having to go, because I lived in a rural town at that stage, I was posted to a rural town, going to the chemist where I could cash in my check and then getting enough money to put in envelopes for fuel, for food, for rent, all of these different things, little buckets of money, to now where you can do it on your phone anywhere in the world. You can.
Right. And guess what? If
It's
you didn't
extraordinary
budget,
when you sort of take a step back and think about how
absolutely.
vastly it's changed.
And if you didn't budget, don't worry. There's buy now, pay later that can, approve you in
Yes.
a matter of minutes and away you go. Problem
Yeah.
solved.
Yeah.
So it really is leveraging of that. And speaking of times changing and technology, I think particularly if we're talking as well as women, in our 40s and 50s, something to be mindful of again is just the number of scammers, right?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah, that was one of the things I was
So
going to talk about. Yeah.
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 So something really important. So this is again where we talk back about money mindset. I'll take it a step back. We naturally have a strong fear instinct response around money because money is tied to our survival. It's how we get food and how we get shelter. So we naturally have a strong response there. If you have then had challenging experiences in childhood, then that will develop an added layer of stress and anxiety to it.
Hmm.
Now, the problem is that when we are in that state, we will make impulsive decisions. Our IQ will drop. Our ability to think about this and go, is this the right move for me? Falls, right? And this is what tech and what scammers are fully aware of. So it is very easy for them and very tempting for them to approach women in their 50s to talk about, to tap into our fear of not having enough money in retirement and whatever it might be, to then get us to make quick decisions to hand over that money and then fall for a scam investment or something like that. And particularly through super, it becomes easy because you don't realize it's a scam until you try to withdraw that money, right? So what we want to do is we want to build our own confidence, fix that, address that money mindset story that says that I'm no good with money, that things don't go my way, that I'm not going to have enough, so that we aren't so susceptible. So that if someone approaches us and says, hey, I have the answer to all of your problems, we can go, awesome, let me have a read of that information. Let me do a little bit of research and I will get back to you. But that's a hard thing to do if we believe that others know better than what we do.
Hmm.
Right? So it becomes really important to acknowledge that if that's a belief system, it is something that I need to work on. I need to consider where it has come from, who has told me that, and why am I believing in it. I need to look for evidence of times when I have actually followed my gut, made the right call. Because most women that I talk to who tell me they're no good with money, they're actually incredibly resourceful, resilient, capable. They just don't see it in themselves. That's sort of why I was saying, am I telling myself the truth or am I telling myself a lie that I bought into?
Yes.
Really starting to build on that and then going, okay, what is it that I need in order to feel confident that I do have what it takes to make a good financial decision? Do I
Mm.
need to understand these particular investments a bit better? Like, what is it that I need? Writing down the list of questions, resources, information, whatever, and then going and seeking that out. And that ends up being that practical way of going, how do I go from a place of really fearing about my retirement to then I now feel confident and in control from that point
Mm.
of view. Because otherwise we'll go and get financial advice. That fear that I make poor financial decisions will transfer. It'll be, well, I then picked the wrong financial advisor. What if they have then given me the wrong advice? There's no end to that fear. We have to tackle it head on.
Wow. It is a lot to unpack, isn't it? It's not just, yeah, and that's why it's interesting. It's not a one size fits all, but there is general advice that you're giving that is so practical that everyone can just take and apply to their own set of circumstances. So let's talk about some of those big life events that revolve around money that can happen in the second half of our life. So it could be retirement or going to a part-time position. So where you go from a life of earning a certain amount to a future where you're actually drawing on, your pot of gold that you've got, your superannuation. Maybe it's in an inheritance that you get when you've got your mum and dad who might pass away. And for some women, it can also involve divorce settlements from what they thought they may have had and the future that they may have had to looking completely different. So what do we need to be aware of, and how do we start, again, coming from that more of the deeper under the iceberg look at, how do we start to deal with some of these bigger events as women?
Yeah. And the other one that just came to mind as well is death of a spouse too.
Yes, yes, of course. Yeah.
So all of that. So often when I speak to women, we have, especially where there's this lump sum that has come in, there's often this well-meaning sort of I suppose, pressure from those around us, everyone, giving in advice, so you should do this, you should do that with it, and all of that. And then we feel like we're losing money if we don't act right away.
Mhm.
So my first piece of advice is give yourself some time. That might be a year, it might be 2 years. You don't have to make these decisions right away. And often waiting for you to be able to grieve, to process everything that's happened, for that fog to lift is the best thing that you can do, right? So sometimes doing nothing is the best thing. So going and finding, a term deposit or a good saving account where you can put that money away so that it's protected, but just easing away from that pressure that I have to act right away and invest it and make the most of it and all of that. Then we can start to regroup and go, all right, well, where am I at right now? This isn't where I had expected to be, but this is where I'm at. First of all, what is it that I need in order to feel safe? What are the things that I'm most concerned about? Really important to get those things out of the way. So putting in my worst case disaster plan. What's my perfect storm? That thing that scares me most. Let's go and write all those things down
Mhm.
and then tackle them and go, okay, right. So now it's time for me to investigate some of this. What insurances do I have? If the house burns down, okay, is that insured? Let's check the fine print on that. Do I have life insurance? Do I have income protection? Do I have health insurance? Checking all of that. What Centrelink benefits would I be eligible for? Like really just working through that list and then going, okay, everything that will not be covered by these other options and alternatives then ends up being cash that I need, right? I need to have that cash reserve because there's no insurance, there's no family member that I can get some support from or stay with or whatever it might be. So for these things, I need cash. That already tells you how much of the money that you have received you can afford to risk by investing.
Mhm.
So we've now just taken that massive pool of money and broken it down to go, is this something that I keep for me right now? And depending on the amount, the answer might be, I actually need to keep all of this to look at these situations. Then I can focus on growing my income and having money to invest. Or it might be that a portion of that is something that's kept aside and then we go and invest. Because otherwise, what happens is because I won't say anyone. Good financial planners, they don't focus on the returns, but those who are trying to sell you an investment property or, another type of investment to entice you, they will focus on the returns. They won't focus on the chances of that money going backwards, going down in value, and maybe taking 10 years to recover, right? And that's sort of the part that we have to consider and go, well, do I have the capacity to ride that out? Now, if that money is my emergency savings, I don't have the capacity to write it down. If something happens, I have no choice but to pull that money out. And now I'm locking in a loss.
Mhm.
That is why it becomes important where we say don't invest your emergency savings and think of it as a long-term game because you don't know. It's a really easy problem to have if the investment does better than what you expected. You go up, that's easy. I can sell it, I can cash in the profit, I can do whatever. What we want to look at, if it takes longer than what we thought, if it doesn't work out the way we plan, can I ride it out until it hits that point where I can cash in the profit? So that becomes the thing to think about. And so then we circle back to our goals and we say, okay, how are my goals affected? Because if the money that I've set aside into this investment is a long-term plan, or if I'm putting it into super and I'm well away from being able to access my super, how does that affect the rest of my goals?
Mhm.
So again, factoring that in, already thinking through these questions, well, you'll already start to know, is this money that should be invested? Is this money that should be put into super, right?
Yeah.
And then if you're going, yep, I'm ready for investments, I'm ready for super, then we can go and, get some specific advice around it. Make sure that we're structuring it around in the right way, make sure that we're mitigating our risks and all those sorts of things. But yeah, it's just a matter of just breaking it down a little bit and going, what's keeping me up at night? And then what are my exciting goals?
Mm.
And then we break it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's such a continuum to the women who would be listening here. For some who are financially independent, who their future is looking rosy, to those who might be under some financial strain, to those who are really feeling the pinch. Perhaps, that they are unemployed, they can't get a job because of their age, or perhaps, they have lost a large amount of money due to say a divorce settlement or whatever it might be. So it can be really triggering. What about for those women who are really experiencing financial hardships now? What sort of advice do you have for them? Because it's hard, I imagine, if you're in that situation, to to act in that way that you were saying before, because when we're stressed, our emotional or our IQ goes down. So how does a woman who might be undergoing real financial stress get through these tough times?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, when you're going through that, I mean, it's literally it's like going, oh, positive thinking. Positive thinking isn't going to help if you're treading water, right? If you're just trying to survive, right? And so what we need to do is, because there are opportunities out there for growth, there are things that we can do. But as you said, right now we are in stress and survival mode. So we need to look at, first of all, what is going to get me out of survival mode. So that can be contacting a financial counselor. That's a free service.
Mm.
So 1-800-007-007 if you think of James Bond, right? That's a free and confidential service. That can be a starting point there, just to point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Thinking about, and sometimes we need to remember that perhaps we are safe. We do have friends and family that we can stay with. We do have support that we can access. Yes, it's not ideal. It's not the way that we will want it. Yes, it's not the way that it should be. But again, focusing on the fact that, you know what, right now I am safe. And coming from a war, I had to often remind myself, you know what, I don't have to keep running, like I'm safe right now. Yes,
Mm.
it's not ideal, but there are things that I can do to be safe.
Yeah.
And so if we can focus on what is it that I need in order to feel safe, first and foremost, then we can start to build from there. So really focusing on calming down the nervous system as well, looking at breathing techniques. And this isn't woo-woo, this is genuinely going, you need to calm your nervous system down so that then you can problem solve. While you are in panic mode, while you're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, you won't be able to take the steps that you need in order for things to shift. So let's focus on getting the foundation sorted, that I have enough access to shelter, to food, to the emotional support that I need. Then we can talk about what's next and how can I rebuild. Because it is, fortunately, we are in Australia. If there's ever a place where we have the opportunity to rebuild, it's here. And technology is now, it can be a double-edged sword, but the good thing is that with it, even though we're facing ageism, there's things that we can do to carve out our own career path. Same way why younger generations are now going more towards self-employment, right?
Mhm.
Because we don't want to be at the mercy of an employer's decision of what's my career path because I'm working part-time because I'm a mum. So we can do that at any age and stage to go, what are my skill sets? Where are my passions? Let's look at how can I create income for myself based on the skills that I have. But I can't get there until I feel safe, until I have addressed those core physical and emotional needs. So yeah, 1-800-007-007, if nothing else, reach out there and get some support and then go from there.
Thank you for that advice. Um, Again, this is going to be not a one size fits all, and it's almost like how long is a piece of string? Because for a lot of women, they're going to be grappling with, well, how much do I need for my future? What sort of money am I talking about and looking at? It's very individual, but what are some starting points that can help us? Is it sort of like you were telling us before, sitting down and just writing down all the things that you're going to need in the future and how much that might cost? And
Yeah, very much so. So having a think about, my age, my health, what are the expenses that are likely to come my way?
Mm.
And where am I at as far as, do I want to keep working? How much do I want to keep working? all those sorts of things. So really starting to map out a little bit of a cash flow there. The ASIC Money Smart website is really great these days. They've made it really consumer friendly so that you can go there and you can have a play around looking at how much super do I need in order to create a certain level of income. It'll compare it based on the current age pension rules and all those sorts of things. So you can start to do a little bit of modeling. But it starts off, first of all, by you knowing your numbers and going, look, let's start with my ideal state. What sort of retirement do I want to have? Okay. And I want to be traveling. I want to do this. I want to do that. Putting in a budget for that and then plugging in the numbers. Then you can start to brainstorm and go, okay, if there isn't quite enough for it to look the way I want it to look, okay, well, let's see. Do I want to work a little bit more? Do I want to, maybe it's not an annual trip to France, maybe it's every 2 years, whatever it might be, and just to adjust it. Um, there is guidance out there as far, so the Association of Super Funds Australia have done some number crunching, but I don't like to quote their numbers because I feel that they are still very conservative. So, and the things that they have budgeted for and allowed for. So, my definition of a comfortable retirement and their definition of a comfortable retirement, I think, are two very different things. So, I would rather point your listeners to sit down, do just a simple cash flow budget and go, okay, once I retire, what expenses am I incurring now that I won't have? For example, I might not have a mortgage anymore because that's paid off. So, my cost of living will be different, but what expenses might I encounter that I'm not encountering at the moment?
Gotcha.
Maybe I will need additional physio or medical treatments or whatever it might be. Factoring that in and then seeing how much annual income do I need, go on the ASIC Money Smart website, have a look at their retirement calculators and have a bit of a plan there. And your super fund as well, they will have great advisors who will be able to help you adjust those numbers, have a play with them, and just see whether the way you're invested at the moment is going to support your retirement goals from that point of
Yeah.
view.
Well, that's some great advice and tips. So thank you for that, because I know there will be people who are going, rightio, how do I get started on this sort of thing? And so I've got an idea of the future. I'd love for you to tell us more about your best-selling book that you had, Wonder Woman's Guide to Money. Where on earth did that title come from? And could your book help someone who's listening? Do you go into those sorts of things in your book as well?
I do. So, Wonder Woman's Guide to Money, it basically came from one of my courses. So, it's Financial Planning 101. It was written to be very concise and easy to read, but basically to tell you, when you don't know what you don't know, it's like, well, where do I start? So, it's
Yeah.
just these are all the things to consider from a financial planning perspective. This is basically how stuff works. So the book will not tell you what you should do. It'll tell you how to make those decisions and talk you through what to consider from that perspective. But I gave it that title because I was writing it with all the women in my life in mind, where you sort of go, she's juggling so much, how does she do it? Oh my God, she's Wonder Woman, like how do you do it? And that's most women these days, right? Everyone is doing so much and it's like, well, how? So I said, well, there you go, Wonder Woman, there's your guide to money for how are you going to do that as well as everything else that you're doing at the moment.
That's brilliant. So, Natasha, when it comes to the topic of money, what advice would you like to give our listeners today? And again, there's so much that you've given us, but what's like the key takeaway that you would love for every woman to have after listening to our conversation?
I think it would be that you're capable of more than what you give yourself credit for. So, uh, just don't give that power away. So I always say there's a difference between delegating and abstaining from a financial decision. So whether it's a family member who's looking after things because they're great with numbers, or whether it's a financial advisor, like you still need to know what's happening and the decisions that are being made need to make sense to you and you need to be confident and comfortable with that. So don't be afraid to ask questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question. The devil is often in the details, and you'll find that when you ask the stupid question, and I say that quote unquote, right? Because it's
Yeah.
not stupid. But when you ask that question, you'll then often see that other people have that same thought. Oh, it's not something that I had looked into or considered or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's basically, it's your life. You want to live it on your terms, and money is that key thing to enable you to do that. So yeah, I would just say, take control of the wheel. If you haven't already, then start doing it now. And even if you have someone advising you or doing it for you, make sure that it makes sense to you.
Yeah, thank you. That's sage advice. How can women get in contact and follow what you're doing now? So we'll have all of the links, but I'll give you the opportunity now just to talk about, the sorts of things and sorts of ways that people can find you.
Yeah, so if you forget, you can sound really bad, but if you just Google Natasha Janssens, my website will come up.
Yes.
But it's womenwithsense.com.au. It's Women
And
with Sense
sense
on
is
Instagram.
CENTS as well. We'll make it.
ENTS, we love our puns.
Yeah.
So, yep, so womenwithsense.com.au and the same on Instagram. And yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, the website's usually the easiest one. You can pop me a message, take the money type quiz, and go from there.
Brilliant. Thank you. And so just some wrap up questions now. What are you working on in your life and career at this moment?
Oh goodness. So I did something very unexpected early in the year and I acquired a second business, which is a boxing gym. So,
Oh my God, really?
so I've gone, well, before you think it's unrelated, the top two New Year's resolutions each year are around money and health and fitness. So I'm now in the process of just basically uh, yeah, bringing that back on its feet, so to speak. That's now sort of going well, and it's
Fantastic.
percolating in the back of my mind. I want to develop this program that helps us and women in particular with that self-care, so financial and physical self-care sort of going hand in hand. So, but that'll be a project for later in the year. At the moment, between that and having, two young kids and all of that,
Yes.
like,
Love it.
so
And you're also studying as well, aren't you?
yes.
There's something else that I'm doing. Oh,
So, right in the midst of all of my major assessments, the business acquisition that came in, I went, this is when you think of, could I really fit any more in the day? Apparently, yeah, you can. But I've put a hold on that at the moment. But yeah, I'm doing a master's in counseling because, as I mentioned, I work essentially as a money therapist,
yeah.
and I've realized there's just so much of childhood trauma that comes into and affects our relationship with money from that point of view. So
Yes.
I'm halfway through there, but I'll be resuming that in the second half of the year. And
Oh, well, it's going to be a busy second half, and you're nearly here because at the time of recording, we're in the middle part of June. So
I know it's flown by.
yes, it's going to be a busy few months ahead for you by the sounds of it. Oh, that's
Absolutely. I
amazing.
wouldn't have it any other way.
And we need to clone you really for things like that because this is really an area that needs a lot more bodies on the ground to help people. I mean, women particularly because we're talking about women today, but that's something that is super important.
Absolutely. So, if you're listening and if this is an area of interest, I encourage you to explore
Yeah.
it because it is going to be a growing area. We know that as a country, we're going to need more counselors as well, but money therapy is only going to continue to grow
Mm.
as
Mm.
more people realize, we live in the age of information, right? And money stress is still a thing. So this is very much going to be a growing area
Yeah,
for
it
sure.
is. Oh, I mean, there's so much information out there, but it's actually putting that what you know into action.
Yeah.
That's
It's
and
overwhelmed now, right?
I always say, like with my mentoring clients as well, knowledge is power, sure, but it's only potential power. That's a quote. I think Jim Quick came up with that. It's
Yeah.
only a potential power unless you do something with it, and sometimes you need that extra person to guide you through and help you and hold you accountable and to make that path a bit easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Natasha, do you have a special role model in your life?
It's a really good question. I'm trying to think. It sounds really bad if I say no. I I think I'm just surrounded by so many amazing people that they're all, yeah, but there isn't one person that I would sort of go, look, this has always been sort of who
Mm.
I've modeled by. I've always been very much a run your own race and all of that. But I do take inspiration from lots of people and I'll reach out and get advice and all of that as and when I need to. So.
Yes. Brilliant. And what are you looking forward to in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, what am I looking forward to? It's a very good question. I'm not sure. It's an opposite answer of I'm terrified of teaching my son to drive. But do you know what? I have been so focused in sort of just enjoying the journey now that, yeah, I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing, I think, what my kids grow up to become and what
Mm.
they end up doing. I'm noticing, little entrepreneurial sparks sort of coming up in both of them. I have a son and a daughter. So yeah, I think more of that. And I love that question because it's made me think more positively. I think one of the reasons that I think I, like so many, have been just so focused in the now is there's just been so much happening in this world that
Yeah.
has been a little bit scary, right?
Mhm.
And so it's been like, well, I don't, when I think about the future, that starts to come to my mind. So I've gone, I'm just going to focus in the short to medium term and see
Yeah,
where we go.
that's a
But
fair answer.
yeah.
Given all the crazy things that are happening at the moment, that's a very fair answer. And just our final question that I always ask my guests, what do you hope that 80-year-old Natasha will say about current day Natasha?
Oh, goodness. Um, I hope she'll say she smashed it. I think she will end up telling me that I could have slowed down a little bit. Um, but yeah, I think one of the reasons that I do the things that I do now is I feel so fortunate that I managed to migrate to Australia. It really wasn't something that was on the cards for me. And, I was often told I had better odds at winning lotto than there was such a series of sliding doors to get me to where I was. And when I came here and I just started working a 9 to 5 job, there was a part of me that just went, you have been given this amazing gift and opportunity, and you're now wasting it just living a perfectly ordinary life. And so I've set out I just want to make an impact on people's lives. So I hope that 80-year-old me will look back and go, you know what, you should feel proud with, all the people whose lives you've touched and the differences that you've made. So hoping for that.
Oh, I have no doubt that that will happen because I know the people who are listening today are going to be feeling that and being able to be better off by listening to the advice that you've given. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for the work that you are doing to help women become more financially aware and their ability to understand their own money stories so they can live and like a happier life, but also be a great role model for the younger women who are in their lives. So thank you, Natasha. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me and for helping me, share more about the work that I do and reaching more people. So thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you feel inspired to make the next chapter of your life the best one yet. Now remember to share this episode with someone else who would love it and connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn at Jo Clark Coaching. All the links and the details from today's episode are in the show notes or at joclarkcoaching.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe this show on your favourite podcast app and leave a 5-star rating and review. This helps more midlife women find these empowering conversations. I can't wait to chat with you next week. Until then, take care and keep creating a life that you love.